Thank you so much for coming to this lecture tonight. So yes, welcome to the second of the 2020 UC Connect lecture series. These lectures are free, but we do ask you to register online for each one. If you've not already done so, you can register online to be alerted to upcoming public lectures. We hope that you enjoyed tonight's lecture and that you return to attend other ones. Just a quick bit of housekeeping, just because that's what I'm supposed to be doing here. Toilets are right outside to my right, your left, so you go out the door around the corner if you've not found them yet. If you hear the fire alarm, please follow our hosts outside. Well, follow me and our hosts outside to the evacuation points. There are 4 emergency exits in this lecture hall. 2 down here, to my left and my right, 2 at the back, also to my left and the right. Hopefully we will not have to use them. In the unlikely event of an earthquake, please stay where you are and take shelter. Do not evacuate unless you're instructed to by myself or the rest of the staff here. Basically follow our instructions. We've been around these buildings before. Hopefully we know what we're doing. Should evacuation be necessary, the assembly point, once you exit the building, is the Clyde Car Park to the east of this building, down the Arts Road near Clyde Road. I don't normally advocate for people being like sheep, but in this case, please stay together and follow all the instructions that we were to give you. And I think that's it for the housekeeping. So, like I said, thank you very much for coming. We've got a fantastic audience spread across, I think, lots of demographics. So hopefully, I'll be able to give you all something to take away from this evening. So I'm Sarah Kessans. I am a lecturer, a brand new, sparkly still lecturer in the College of Engineering's School of Product Design. I've been here at UC for 7 years, and I'll tell you a little bit about my journey here at UC here in a little bit. But overall today, I'm going to be talking about testing the limits of science and adventure. These are basically my dual passions, scientific research and adventure. Before I sort of go into the big adventures, just a little bit of background on my journey and where I came from. As you might be able to tell, first of all, I don't have this on. Sorry guys. Getting carried away here. Yeah. It's a good idea. We're gonna do this. Apologies, team. As you might be able to tell by both the volume of my voice, as well as my accent, I am not a native Kiwi. I have been here in Christchurch for 7 years, and I do call Christchurch home now, but I was originally born in the US. I grew up sort of all over the United States. Grew up in California, and then moved to the middle of the country to Indiana, where I sort of grew up on 160 acres, and I really developed a passion for the outdoor world and the natural world, and sort of exploring and going on adventures around my family's farm. And I also started developing a passion for both science and then, when I was a younger kid, athletics. Not big adventures when I was young, but mostly basketball and softball and high school and track in high school. And so, like I said, I started off Eastern High School, a tiny little high school in southern Indiana, just 400 students total, where I had a phenomenal science research teacher that really got me interested in using my curiosity to pursue scientific questions and trying to understand the natural world. From Eastern High School, I had a phenomenal opportunity to go to the Weizmann Institute of Science in Rehovot, Israel, and do a plant evolution internship, looking basically at how wheat has evolved. And that really got me a taste for what scientific research at the university level was like. And basically then for the rest of my career, decided to pursue scientific research at the university level. So I went on to Purdue University, which is sort of the Lincoln University of Indiana. So it's a big agricultural school. And so I was majoring in plant biology at Purdue University, had an internship at the University College of Dublin, looking at the way that plants interact with fungal pathogens. Went on to get my PhD at Arizona State University, working on a plant-based HIV vaccine. And from Arizona State, basically I fell in love with the mountains and the rivers and the lakes of Arizona, wanted to find somewhere else with mountains and rivers and lakes, and came out here to UC 7 years ago for a 2-year postdoc, and I haven't gotten kicked out yet. But like I said, sort of all the way going back to high school, like I said, I was really starting to get interested in both science and athletics and different sports. And so I was really lucky to find the rowing team at Purdue University. I had never rowed a stroke in my life. Basically grew up on a farm that didn't have a whole lot of water. We had a little tiny river. Basically had no idea what the sport of rowing was. Are any of you guys rowers in the room? Excellent, brilliant. So I came into my first year of university having no idea what rowing was all about, and I absolutely fell in love with the sport of rowing. It is one of the most difficult physical challenges. Basically, you're rowing these races that are either 6,000 meters or 2,000 meters, and a lot of it's mostly anaerobic, so you're not getting oxygen to your blood. Just really tough physically. Really tough mentally, because it's really hard to do physical things when you can't get oxygen to your muscles. But then also just the sense of teamwork. I just really enjoyed that sense of teamwork. There are about 115 members, both guys and girls on the rowing team at Purdue, and that became my family at Purdue. So it was a physical challenge, it was a mental challenge, and it was my family. And basically, I knew that I wanted to continue rowing for as long as I possibly could, right? Now, when most people graduate university, either they're really, really good, and they can go on and continue rowing in the Olympics. I wasn't that good, and I'm also not that tall. As you can see, I'm probably one of the shortest people in my boat. A lot of other people go on to row with clubs. I know there's a phenomenal club scene here throughout Christchurch and Canterbury, and that's another great way to continue rowing after university. But I had a little bit different of a dream, right? So I read a lot, and I happened to pick up a book while I was in Dublin on my internship, and this book just really captured my imagination and got me to dreaming. This kid from Indiana, from landlocked Indiana, that adventure isn't a thing that most people do. And I just kept this dream, and this dream got bigger and bigger, and the more I talked about it, the more and more I wanted to do it. And so I brought that idea to my rowing team there at Purdue, and they told me I was crazy. I told them that I wanted to row across the Atlantic Ocean, right? Keep in mind, most of us are rowing 2 kilometers, right? These races are 2 kilometers. I wanted to race across the Atlantic Ocean. So what is this crazy race? This is a fully self-supported, human-powered, 5,000-kilometer race across the Atlantic Ocean in 8-meter-long ocean rowing boats, right? Again, more than 100 members on my rowing team. I figured everybody would want to go with me. And basically, I had one taker, Emily Cole, who was, we were actually very much competitors for the majority of our rowing career. So this Atlantic rowing race, what does it actually entail, right? So it's a 5,000-kilometer race. The Atlantic Ocean is pretty big. Now, granted, the Pacific is even bigger, but the Atlantic is still quite a long ways across. And so we were going from La Gomera in the Canary Islands to Antigua in the West Indies, right? Straight shot across 5,000 kilometers, right? Obviously, it's probably not going to be quite the straight shot because there's some winds and some storms and things that are going to be there along the way. The Woodvale Atlantic Rowing Race, the first race went in 1997, was meant to be a one-off. And then they had successive races in 2001 and 2003. It was a great success. And basically everyone that made it to the starting line, most people made it across without too much of a hassle. So it's a fully self-supporting race. So if you break an oar and you have to get resupplied, then technically you're disqualified from the race. But you can keep going, right? Not the end of the world. And the races typically run at the end of November, early December, far, far after hurricane season has ended, right? So typically, we have the trade winds with us and the north equatorial current that should, in theory, help us along a little bit, right? So most of my teammates there at Purdue thought I was crazy, with the exception of Emily Cole. But there were other crazy people out there with us. We weren't the only ones. So in the 2005 race, there were 26 teams from all over the world, right? And the teams were comprised of 4 force teams. So basically 4 teams that had 4 people on the boat. Most of the fleet was made up of pairs, so 2 people per boat. And then there were 2 that are even a little bit level crazier than we were, that were rowing it solo. All right? So we were Team American Fire. We are one of 4 all-female teams. We are the only American team in the race, and we were one of the youngest teams to compete as well. So there was only one team that was younger than us, and collectively, Tom and Chaz from Bristol were 3 months younger than we were, so they took that title away from us. We became really good friends with those guys during the training. Now, obviously, for those of you that play sports or music or do science or basically anything that you do, you know, whatever you want to do, in order to do it well, you're going to have to prepare quite a bit. And obviously, ocean rowing is the same. So we had 2.5 years of training prior to the race. This was during the middle of my undergraduate career that I decided to do this. Emily, my teammate, was a year older than me, so she was getting ready to graduate. But again, if you guys are here as an undergraduate, you know how difficult that can be, just getting through your degree. We were also training to row across the Atlantic Ocean. We got very little sleep those years. But we had 2.5 years to prepare. A lot of that went into boat preparation, right? So most teams either build their own boat. It's out of 28 sheets of marine plywood, or they buy a secondhand boat. And we were really lucky to buy a secondhand boat from an American team that had rowed a few years before. But we still had to sort of gut it, put all the electronics in, put all new equipment in, and make sure that it was ready to go in ship shape for our crossing. One of the biggest parts of preparation was fundraising, right? So both Emily and myself came from very working class backgrounds. Our families did not have any money to contribute to a crazy dream like this. They supported us, but absolutely could not help financially. So it was a lot of going to boat shows and to these multi-million-dollar yacht companies and asking for money. And we became very humble in the sponsorship process. But we ended up getting about $150,000 in sponsorship and donations to actually get the boat ready and for all of our training. We had some phenomenal training down in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, both professional courses in sea survival, navigation, radio, and first aid at sea. And then also we spent 3 months again down in Fort Lauderdale training both on the intercoastal waterways and then out on the open ocean on the Atlantic there in Fort Lauderdale. If you guys remember 2005, and it's been a few years ago now, that was the year of Hurricane Rita and Hurricane Katrina. And so while we were training down in Fort Lauderdale, Hurricane Katrina actually came through. We were training down in Key Largo, about 50 miles south of Fort Lauderdale, when we sort of saw this storm coming across the weather facts. And fortunately, we were able to get back up to our marina and put the boat away before the storm hit. But we had a lot of great storms through our training there in Fort Lauderdale as well. We didn't know how much that was going to come in handy later in the race. Right, so just a little bit about the boat, because these things aren't all that common. There are some phenomenal Kiwi teams that have rowed across the Atlantic, but there's not that many ocean rowing boats even in New Zealand. So the boat, for the pairs boat, is 7 meters long. For the fours boat, are a little bit bigger at 8 meters long, but we're fully self-contained. So we have solar panels that feed marine batteries inside the cabin that power all of our equipment on board. And so one of the main bits of equipment that we have on board is a water desalinator, because we're not going to want to carry enough water for 50 to 100-day voyage. So the water desalinator was both the biggest piece of equipment for our survival, but also was one of the biggest power-hungry machines out there as well. We had GPS units and lots of redundancy in that system to make sure that we could navigate our way across the ocean. We did learn celestial navigation, which is quite difficult on a really little boat, if any of you have ever done navigation with a sextant. We had a lot of equipment that helped us monitor the weather, so barometric pressure and temperature and wind speed, which again, we didn't understand at the beginning of this how handy that was going to how much that was going to come into handy later in the race. Satellite phone and plenty of radios, both to communicate with our shore support team, with the support yachts that were out there. Out of the 26 boats, there were 2 support yachts that were following the fleet that would basically be spread out, making sure that if we needed anything, they were sort of there. And then up at the top right is an EPIRB, right? This little yellow box that basically changed my life. And without that little EPIRB right there, I would not be standing here today. But we'll tell you that story here in a little bit. Right? So lots of equipment, but basically the most important equipment that we had on the boat was our fuel. And we had enough fuel on board for 5,000 calories per person per day. When the semi-trailer dropping off this pallet of food arrived at my house there in southern Indiana, it was quite the shock, just the volume of the food. So most of it was freeze-dried meals, sort of like what you would eat tramping. Lots of snacks, from chips to dried fruit to nuts, basically anything that could be eaten quickly and that tasted good. So the more fat, the more salt, the better. We were going to be rowing quite a bit, so the more calories, the better. And again, trying to fit 75 days worth of food into a little boat was quite the adventure in and of itself. So after 2.5 years of blood, sweat, and tears, right? So we are, just graduated our undergraduate degrees. I was a science major. Emily was a history major. Really, 2.5 years prior, we had no idea what we were getting ourselves into. But we got to the starting line. And a lot of the other teams, much older and much more experienced, didn't even make it to the starting line. So just getting there was a big part of the dream in and of itself. We're actually one of the most prepared boats of the race, so we were really proud of that. Going through our scrutineering session, the race officials were really happy with the way that we had all of our emergency systems set up, and that we were really a well-prepared team. So again, it was just a point of pride just getting to that start line. And then also getting to see the other boats as well. So for 2.5 years, again, we were going to these yacht clubs that were, multi-million-dollar yachts, not rowers, and definitely not people in our position, and just lots of people telling us that we're crazy and that it'll never work and we'll never get anywhere. And to get to the starting line with all these other crazy people was pretty amazing. Lots of drinks in the pub with our fellow ocean rowers. So after 2.5 years, we finally get to the starting line, right? Now, a little bit of background here. So the Canary Islands had not had a tropical storm in 15 years. 3 days prior to the start of the race, they had their first tropical storm in 15 years, right? This is the end of November. Hurricane season should be over in October. So it wasn't the greatest foreshadowing as to what was to come. So the race was delayed by a few days, but when we finally started in early December, we had sort of a record-breaking day. It was an absolutely gorgeous bluebird day. The winds were all headed in the right direction. Everybody's just got this adrenaline going, and it was one of the most magical days of my life. So Emily and I were the white boat in the middle there. We both started out rowing together for a couple of hours, and finally, we'd rowed together for a couple hours. I took a little bit of a break. Emily continued rowing on her own, and then basically we started these 2-hour shifts. So the majority of the time that we're going to be out there, we're going to be rowing 2 hours on, 2 hours off, 24 hours a day. So you're rowing for 12 hours a day, right? Not very fast, but it's an 800 kilogram boat. So that's a lot of rowing. And so anyway, so we started this 2-hour shift. Basically, I started my first 2-hour shift that evening as the sun was setting. And sort of all these different thoughts are going through my head. We had trained away from land, but we had never left land knowing we weren't going to see the next land for another couple of months. And so, I sort of have all these different feelings and a little bit of nerves, not quite sure what to expect as the sun is setting. As I'm rowing along, putting my oars into the water and taking them out, I sort of looked into the water and I could not believe what I was seeing, because it should be dark. It's getting dark. And I lift my oars out of the water and it was like diamonds dripping off my oars. So we rowed through phosphorescence for about 20 minutes, and it was just the most magical thing. And in my head at that moment, I thought, this is going to be a phenomenal adventure. This is going to be a lot of fun. And it was. We had 46 days of adventure. We started off, like I said, that first day was pretty nice. For the first week or so, it was fairly decent weather. After that first week, we had a little bit of a storm. It was actually Hurricane Epsilon that was several hundred miles off from us, but it was definitely pushing tropical depressions onto the fleet, and basically we had to sit on sea anchor for a couple days, which a sea anchor is sort of like a big parachute that deploys underwater that keeps you with the wind and the waves. So if the wind is against you, it keeps you from basically rowing or from drifting back to the islands. So we sat on sea anchor for a couple days. It's not a lot of fun being cramped up in this tiny cabin, the two of you rocking in the waves, but it wasn't the end of the world. The waves and the wind got better, and we kept going, and just had some really, really neat experiences those first couple of weeks. So we had several flying fish that would come into the boat, and they've like these little paper birds that are floating along the waves. They're really, really cool until you're rowing at night and they hit you in the face. That's not as fun, but they're a beautiful watch during the day. We had some phenomenal sunrises and sunsets, and like I said, a couple days that we spent sitting on sea anchor, sort of just watching the waves that we couldn't row against the wind. So after those first 4 weeks, we went through Christmas. That was the first Christmas we had spent apart from our families. We went through New Year's. We shot off a flare. We were all excited. We'd made it sort of, getting to be closer to halfway to this race. And then after those first 4 weeks, we started to have some unusual weather. So basically, after New Year's, for the next 2 weeks, we never really had waves under about 10 meters. Right? So we think about 10 meters. Now, the height of a wave is not really the big problem. It's when they become more steep, right? So when those waves start breaking. So the problem with that is we never had wind under about 20 knots. And we knew this because we had really great weather monitoring systems, which it was great to have good equipment, but after the first couple days, it started to get a little bit wearing on us. So after the first couple days, and we've got 10-meter waves, so we called our shore support team and said, hey, it's pretty big weather out there. What's going on? They said, well, there's Tropical Storm Zeta that's sitting about 200 miles to the north of you, and it's pushing tropical depressions down to you. And we're like, yep, we could figure that out. And the thing about these tropical depressions is that it created cyclonic winds. So basically, winds would be coming from one direction, and then they'd shift direction, and then they'd shift direction, and they'd shift direction. So rather than the waves coming all in a succession that you can predict and you can row with, they're coming sort of from all different directions, and that made it very, very difficult to row. So we'd go through the next couple days, and we're like, all right, we'll get through this. We're mentally tough. We're physically tough. We're rowers. We can get through this. And then we call either the support yacht or our shore support team, and hey, it's still pretty big. When's it getting better? And they're like, so it'd be Monday. And they're like, by Wednesday. By Wednesday, it's going to be much better. So, all right, well, we can get through a couple days. And by Wednesday, it would still be pretty big waves, and now they're breaking a little bit more frequently and more violently. All right, so what's the weather forecast look like? By Friday. By Friday, it's going to be much better. And of course, Friday rolls around, and we call our shore support team. And they're like, you guys are in the biggest waves of the Atlantic. Awesome. And it looks like about 500 miles from Antigua, you're good to go. We are 1,400 miles from the nearest dry land. All right? So at this point, we are 3 days past halfway. We'd been sitting in this pretty bad weather for about 2 weeks at this point, and it came up to the night of January 15th, 2006. And I was doing rowing my 10 o'clock to midnight shift. There was a lot of clouds. They were covering the moon. It was very difficult to see which direction the waves were coming from. We'd get waves that hit up against the side of the boat and splash us and basically knock us off our seats. And I mean, it was impossible to row, but much less, try to keep the boat in line with whatever wind and waves were coming. So it got to be about midnight, due to switch over from my shift to Emily's shift. And we started getting what we call these waterfall waves, which waves that are breaking over the top of the boat. And I called it. We didn't like to stop rowing because we were trying to go out and get a record here. But I called it, I said, it's not safe to be out there rowing. So we shipped the oars, basically set the rudder, and put out the sea anchor, and got inside the cabin. Right? So midnight until dawn the next morning, sort of sat in the cabin, rocking back and forth. The cabin is sort of built for one person, so we're squeezed in there, the two of us. Not very much fun. It's dark, it's hot, it's sticky, it's wet. It's not fun. So the next day, it dawned, and we were able to see the waves, and yeah, it's definitely still not very safe to be out there. And so we went through the morning and tried to keep each other's morale sort of as high as we possibly could, trying not to get on each other's nerves too much. By this point, we've been sitting on sea anchor for at this point 12, 15 hours. And finally, about 2:30 that afternoon, we decided to call the support yacht just to see how the other teams were doing, if they're caught in this as well, and what potentially what the weather is doing and if it's going to get better. Usually the support yacht had a lot of positive things to say and just a kind word to help us keep going. And this day I called them up. They answered, "Hey, we're really busy. Call us back later, click." Not the words of comfort we were looking for. So wasn't much we could do. We couldn't row, so we sat in the cabin for a couple more hours until about 4:30 that afternoon, when Emily had the satellite phone in her hand, getting ready to call the support yacht back, when we got slammed in our port side and flipped upside down. We are 1,400 miles from the nearest dry land. We are 3 days past halfway. We are in 10-meter waves and 30-knot winds. The boats are designed to be self-righting, so we've got 200 liters of ballast that should flip us back over. But at the time, we'd been sitting on the sea anchor for 18 hours and had gotten quite oxygen deprived in the cabin, so we'd taken out the inner caps to our ventilating fans. When we're upside down, we now have 2 bathtub faucets that are rushing into the cabin. The weight of our bodies and the water rushing in the cabin prevented us from self-righting. So there we were in our once beautifully ship-shaped cabin, now rapidly filling up with water. Emily was just the most incredible teammate that I could ever ask for in that instance. And now this bathtub breakfast cereal that we're working in, she grabbed a pair of shorts and shoved it into her vent to prevent the water from coming into her vent. So I tried to do the same with a vent that was on my side. This is actually where our VHF radio was positioned. So when I tried to reach down into the water to close my vent, I started getting shocked, right? So we flipped off all the electronics, stuffed the other vent, and at least at that point we didn't have water rushing into the cabin. So there we were, in this half-full cabin full of water. It's dark, there's all of our clothes and food and everything just floating around. And then right there where it should be is that little yellow EPIRB, right? So it took about 30 seconds to deliberate, and we're both physically okay. This is not the ideal situation, but we've trained for this. We did try to flip it back over and recognize that the boat was not going to right itself, and there was no way that we were going to be able to right the boat. So pretty quickly we recognized that this was an emergency situation. So we flipped the switch on the EPIRB, right? Now we have to get out of the cabin, right? So the pressure on the inside of the cabin that was still left with air, and the pressure on the outside of the cabin, which was water, the differential was too great to be able to open up the hatch. So what we had to do was basically take out the shorts from the vents, let the cabin fill up, open the hatch, swim out, and get on top of the boat, which was easier said than done. So we let the cabin fill up, took one last breath, opened the hatch. I swam out, grabbed onto the outside of the boat, and waited for Emily, and waited for Emily, and waited quite a long time for Emily, and she'd actually gotten caught up in a throw line, emergency throw line that we had there on the deck. Almost didn't make it out of the cabin, right? But eventually, we both were able to get on top of the boat. We took our life jackets and we harnessed ourselves to each other. At the time, because it was quite hot inside the cabin, I was wearing a pair of shorts. Emily was wearing a pair of shorts and a sports bra, and then we also now have have our life jackets. And we had one foul weather jacket that was inside the cabin. So Emily was wearing that. All of our emergency gear was in our front hatch. Had we needed to get that, we could have. But at the time, we just wanted to make sure we were okay and we were on top of the boat. So that's where we were, about 5 o'clock in the evening there. Again, there had been some foul weather for the last couple weeks, and there were a few food boats that had capsized, and there was the Irish team that had to be rescued. They were rescued by the support yacht in 8 hours. So we thought, all right, again, this is not an ideal situation. This is not really what we were hoping for, but we'll give it 8 hours. It's not going to be the end of the world. You know, we'd been training for 5 years. We've been teammates for 5 years together, training for this ocean row for several years. We were prepared for an emergency like this. So the first thing we sort of did was, keep each other's morale as high as possible. So we were singing songs and telling jokes and just trying to stay as positive as we possibly could in this situation. And then it got dark. And then it got cold. And the waves are still crashing over us. And so we got thrown off the boat, and we'd pull each other up on top of the boat. 6 hours goes by. 8 hours goes by. We thought, all right, anytime the sport yacht wants to come by, that'd be great. 10 hours goes by. 12 hours goes by. We're getting pretty tired, pretty cold. 14 hours goes by, and we see a light on the horizon. And we haven't seen a ship in 2 weeks because nobody sends ships out in tropical storms. So this light on the horizon, we knew it was probably a positive thing. And so we sort of watched it. We couldn't sit up for very much because if you sat up, you got knocked off the boat. So we were laying down and trying to watch through the waves this light. And the light's slowly getting brighter. We're like, all right, this is probably a good sign. And after about 15 minutes or so, we actually see a navigation light. And this meant it was definitely coming towards us. So we were on top of the world. We're like, sweet, we're going to be rescued. This is our rescue ship. We're all good. And started singing songs again. But again, we can't sit up very much. So we're laying down and we're going to wait for the boat to come to us because we knew it was going to take a little bit for the boat to come to us. So about 10 minutes later, we sort of popped our heads up and tried to figure out, where the ship was in relation to us. And it was gone. Right? So again, there's lots of waves, and we figured maybe at this point, it's just on a different wave frequency than us. So we kept looking, and for half an hour, there's just nothing. Right? So this was very much the lowest point of my life. Thinking we were going to be rescued, and then questioning whether anyone even knew that we had capsized or that we were having problems, and if maybe, we're nearly 15 hours in. The support yacht should be here by now. Maybe they don't know that we're in trouble. So it was a very quiet half an hour. There was no singing or joking during that half an hour. But spoiler alert, we survived. So about half an hour after we had seen this light from the ship, we saw a light in the sky, and we hadn't seen a plane for 46 days. So we knew this was definitely a good thing. So eventually this plane started circling around us, and eventually the ship that we had seen eventually came back towards us. And right now, it's starting to get just a little bit of a gray twilight on the ocean. So we're starting to just see a little bit. So we knew the plane was still overhead. They dropped this orange flare. And these, I don't know if you've ever seen these flares, but they are so bright that you go blind if you watch them. And so we stared at it because it was real, and it was definitely a rescue. It wasn't going away. So eventually the ship starts coming towards us, and the way that we're sitting on the boat, Emily's facing towards the ship, and I'm facing away from it. And she's sort of rubbing her eyes. She's got one contact lens in. She can't really see in the best of times. She's like, what is this coming towards us? And I was thinking a Coast Guard cutter or a tanker ship or something massive based on the lights that we had seen earlier. So I turn around, and this is what I see. It's like, cool. So we're capsized, and now we have pirates to deal with. Awesome. So these guys saved our lives. So this is the tall ship Stavros Niarchos. It's a British sail training vessel. They're actually registered as a National Lifeboat Association ship. And so Darren Naggs, who's the captain on board, he was only 35 years old at the time. His friends now tell him he can pick up women anywhere. But no, so out of the 60 sailors on board, 48 of them were just learning how to sail and had a phenomenal rescue. Basically put out a life raft for us. We were able to climb off of our pride and joy, the third teammate of American Fire, into the warm blankets and arms of the crew. And again, at this point, I'm wearing a pair of shorts and a life jacket. And the purser says, "Here, I'll take your life jacket." We smelled really, really bad. And I was like, "I'm really sorry. I don't know you guys that well yet." So anyway, so they rescued us, and we spent 11 days on board. They got us back on the water, literally back into the saddle. We had a little bit of a rowing race with some of the crew once we reached the islands. We got to tie up to palm trees, explore these Caribbean islands. Basically, they gave us the option whether we wanted to stay on board or get dropped off in Barbados, and we said we don't have any plans right now. We'll take this. We'll take the adventure. So it's had a bit of an adventure there in the end after our rescue. Again, phenomenally grateful for these guys, both for the U.S. Coast Guard with the C-130 plane, as well as the crew of the Stavros. But that's not why we were out there, right? So we didn't go out there for a trip to the Caribbean. We went out there to break a record and to follow our dreams and to really live our dreams there. And so we got the amazing opportunity to try again in 2007. Yes, my parents were really supportive, believe it or not, as were Emily's. So we were the race organizer of the Woodvale Events race had a force boat ready to go, basically, and so we raised money for the charity that owned the boat, the Meningitis Trust. And so we were the 4 women that did not finish in 2005. So Tara Remington was on a pairs boat. So she's from Auckland. She and her teammate Ian actually got attacked by a great white shark. But that's their story to tell. Ian wanted nothing to do with ocean rowing anymore. Fair enough. Tara was keen to go again. Joe Davies was on a fours boat in 2005 and had to get taken off after she injured her back. And then obviously Emily and myself from the American Fire. The 2007 race was a lot more fun. First of all, with 4 people, it's a totally different race. So you're actually rowing with somebody, so you can go a whole lot faster, which was really fun. And then you also had another teammate on the off shifts in order to help you with some of the actual work, whether you're communicating with the shore support team or navigating or fixing meals, cooking, cleaning the bottom of the boat, because we had a lot of algae and barnacles that would grow on the bottom of the boat. Most of the time, it was kind of nice to share the cabin with somebody because you got to share meals and things like that. Sleeping wasn't as much fun because there's not as much room. But had amazing sunrises, sunsets, just some of the most calming, peaceful, beautiful times I've ever had. I'm not a religious person, but it's impossible not to be spiritual out there in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. Just living your dreams, really. Lots of really cool wildlife. Again, more flying fish that came on board. We never ate any of them, but there was enough on them. We could have made quite a good meal. Lots of whales, lots of dolphins. Some really neat dolphins that had some acrobatics for us. And this tropics bird, which in 2005 visited us during Christmas, on New Year's, and the day that we were rescued. And in 2007, it visited us quite a bit, and so that was a really special bird for us. And I'm taking this picture out the back hatch, and this bird's literally flying into my face. But it was great to have that tropics bird around. Now, that's not to say that there were not storms in 2007, because there absolutely were. Again, having 4 people that experienced 2005, we sort of knew what we were getting ourselves into. And we experienced the storms differently than a lot of the teams that hadn't been out there before. And we're able to actually have 2 people rowing and 1 person on the rudder, and we could actually surf down the back of these massive waves. So normally, we'd be going about 4 or 5 knots. Surfing down the back of these waves, we'd go about 15 knots. So it's a lot of fun. So while other teams, we could tell from their blogs, they were hunkered up or they're on sea anchor, we were surfing down the back of these waves at 15 knots. And because we were doing that, we came across the line on January 23rd, 2008. The previous women's record was 68 days. We came across the line in 51. It was, again, just one of the most amazing days of my life. This dream, this adventure that had started 4 years prior, we had finished, and we finished it together. And Tara, who is our resident Kiwi, taught us the haka while we were out there. Now, it's very difficult to learn the haka when you're sitting down, because you can't really stand. So I'm really glad that was never recorded. So we came into Antigua, into English Harbor in Antigua, about 2:30 in the morning on January 23rd, after the pub had closed. But we became team Finish Business. Now, just quickly, because I've talked too much here already, my other passion, right? So we have adventure and athletics and sport and science, right? So I came here to UC 7 years ago, thinking it's just going to be a direct shot, and I'm going to become an academic, become a professor in 2 years' time, and retire in 3, right? That was the goal. As life, as I well knew, life doesn't always work out quite the way that you planned. You don't get a record on the first try. So I've been here 7 years. Like I said, I intended to come for one postdoc, looking at the way E. coli bacteria evolve, and sort of the bits and pieces, the enzymes that make them tick and make them do cool things, how those enzymes evolve, and basically making stronger bacteria, right? Which is an important thing for trying to understand antimicrobial resistance and lots of cool things. But I came here for 2 years. That's what I was going to do, and then I was going to go back to the States, right? Get all the adventures I could here in New Zealand, and then go back to the States. I fell in love with New Zealand. And I fell in love with biochemistry, a little bit deeper into molecular understanding. And so I started working with filamentous fungi, which are sort of like the molds that grow on your bread. This is where we get penicillin. We get a lot of cool antibiotics, a lot of really neat compounds. So I started understanding what makes those compounds inside the fungi. We started making and manipulating these biosynthetic pathways to produce new agricultural compounds and pharmaceuticals. And I was having a lot of fun doing that. And then NASA called for astronauts. And I thought, why not? So I threw my name in the hat with 18,000 other people, thinking, I love my research here at New Zealand. I'm just going to keep doing that, but why not try? And then they called me back. And I went through the entire astronaut selection process in 2017. Got down to the top 50 of 18,000, which was an amazing experience. Met the most incredible people, both at NASA and my fellow interviewees. And that completely changed my path, right? I thought I had this path of where I was going with my research, and said, no, I want to take my fungi and I want to put them into space, right? Which does actually have a scientifically valid reason to basically working towards habitations on the moon and Mars. And so I've been working with UC Aerospace and now working at the School of Product Design to try to develop these biological experiments in microgravity. And Christchurch is a really fun place to do this. We've got a real growing aerospace industry and aerospace programs here at UC. And so I've actually got some funding to develop a satellite to do some of these biological experiments in microgravity. So that's where I've been. That's my journey, both adventures and science. And a lot of the lessons that I've learned with both of those they apply to both science and adventure. And one of the first lessons that I've learned is that nothing can replace hard work, right? These are going to sound cheesy, but these are the things that really every day, whether I'm playing ultimate frisbee or in the science research lab or lecturing students, these are the things that really are my core values, right? Nothing can replace hard work, no matter what, right? Whatever it is that you're doing, you have to put in the hours. Right? There's absolutely no replacement for that. But that said, a lot of life is luck, right? We all have good luck, we have bad luck. We don't get to choose where we were born. We don't get to choose our parents. We don't get to choose our early education. So understanding people's backgrounds and understanding people's stories are really important in understanding people and understanding our communities. I've been really fortunate to have a lot of good luck, in growing up in countries that are able to support my dreams, having people around me that support my dreams, but I also understand a lot of that is just luck, hard work and luck. And to that end, because a lot of life is luck, it's really important to lift each other up when we can. If we have the power to lift people up around us, it's really important because we don't know people's stories. We don't know what people have been to. We're all in this together. We're on this one planet together. If you have the power to lift people up around you, if you have the power to sing songs and tell jokes when you're on the top of a capsized boat, that's what we got to do. Because there's lots of storms in life, right? No one is immune to the storms in life. We all have these storms. It's just part of being alive on this planet. But that said, this is one of the quotes that we had on the bulkhead, inside bulkhead of our boat. There's sunshine after every storm, right? We went through a lot of pretty bad storms that we thought were never, ever going to end. And even after the worst of them, we get these phenomenal rainbows, and we just sit there and we'd smile and dry our toes. So there is sunshine after a storm. I've been called crazy more times than I can count, right? It takes a lot of courage to be different. There were so many times sitting on this twin mattress in the living room of my friend's house in Fort Lauderdale when I thought, so many people think we're crazy. Nobody believes that we can do this. Why don't we just give up, right? But we kept going. We had the courage to be different. We had the courage to keep going. We felt the fear, and we did it anyways. And that's not just with rowing. With a lot of the scientific things that I'm trying to do, I write these grants, and you put your dream out there to people, and they say, nope. You got to keep going, right? You got to have that courage to keep going, even if it's different, even if people tell you you're crazy, even if people don't really understand what it is you're trying to do. Wash your hands. One more, hold on, I'm not done yet. Last one. Pursue your passions with all of your heart, because you never know where it's going to lead you. And finally, this is one of my favorite quotes. We pay a heavy price for our fear of failure. There's no learning without some difficulty and fumbling. If you want to keep on learning, you must keep on risking failure all your life. And so this is what I hope you guys take away tonight, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you guys have. So the question was, how did we stop from killing each other? That is a very, very good question. So basically that morning before the capsize, we're sitting there again. We're very, very frustrated because we know we're not going to be able to row for a little while. I'm eating sunflower seeds, which are crunchy and apparently really, really annoying. Had we not capsized, Emily might have killed me anyways. No, it was a lot of training and understanding what each other's limits were, and being respectful of the other person. And so again, we had been teammates at that point while we were on the ocean for 5 years. The 3 first years that we had on the Purdue rowing team, we were not friends. We were very competitive against each other. But again, we understood, when to stop pushing each other's buttons. We knew we were a team. We knew the only way that we were going to get through this adventure was together, and that we needed the other person. So yeah, it was difficult sometimes, though.
Can you talk more on what you want to do with fungi and microgravity?
Yeah, so the question was, what do I want to do with fungi and microgravity? So there's a lot of cool things we can do with fungi and microgravity. So especially if we're looking to colonize either a space station or a station that's going around the moon or a moon base or a Mars base, we're going to need to grow stuff to keep humans alive, right? And microorganisms are the easiest way to do that, whether it's fungi or cyanobacteria. And so what I'm looking to do is to create food, fuel, pharmaceuticals, and building materials out of fungi. And fungi have a lot of really cool properties in and of themselves, but we will be able to manipulate some of those biosynthetic pathways to make new flavors or new chemicals for pharmaceuticals, or different structures for building materials. But first we have to test that either in the space station or in a free-floating satellite. And so that's what we're looking to do. Yeah. Yes.
I have lots of questions. Sunburn, bathing, hygiene, plastic pollution, oil pollution. Did you see a shark?
Come, we'll start with those. So sunburn, lots of sun cream the first couple weeks, and then we got tan enough that basically our bodies weren't burning anymore. Bathing, difficult. Basically, we would jump in the water every couple weeks. Otherwise, if a storm came through, that's what we would do. Hygiene. This is actually the #1 asked question by kindergartners. Bucket and chuck it was how we used the facilities. And you don't throw the bucket over the same side that you wash your toothbrush on. Wash your hands, right? Plastic pollution, we kept everything on board. And that was actually one of our biggest disappointments when we capsized, because when we capsized, all of our trash that we'd kept meticulously on board was floating in the ocean. And that was obviously capsizing was not ideal. But sitting on top of the boat, seeing our trash around us was just heartbreaking to us, knowing that obviously we did that. But otherwise, we kept all of our trash on board. Yeah. Is that?
Did you see other pollution?
Yes, actually we did. Yeah, no, we did see other plastic pollution. A lot of fishing nets out there that become their own sort of ecosystems with fish and stuff. But yeah, that was another sad thing that we saw out there as well. Sorry. Yeah. Nope. Nope. Sorry. Were we scared? At times we were, absolutely, yes. It's hard to look at 15, 10-meter waves that are crashing over you and not be scared at times, especially when they look like just a wall of water. And so I would be lying if I told you that I wasn't scared. But because we went through that, we learned to be brave. All the way in the back. Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
So how cold did it get when you were on the boat? And also, what was your favorite joke?
So how cold did it get while we were on top of the boat? So it is mid-Atlantic, but we were in the middle of a tropical storm. So I can no longer do this conversion back to Celsius. But it was, 60s, 70s Fahrenheit. So it was, sort of ambient temperature. But when you've got waves crashing over you and then the wind that's basically evaporating the waves off of you, it got cold. I mean, we weren't hypothermic, but it wasn't very comfortable. And what the favorite joke, it became a joke afterwards, actually, is so we were singing, do you guys know Alanis Morissette's Ironic? So we were singing that, but for some reason we couldn't remember who sang it. So we said on multiple interviews once we got back that we were singing Natalie Imbruglia's Ironic. That's not real. That's not a thing. So that became a running joke afterwards, yeah.
Did you ever get the boat back?
Yes, so did we ever get the boat back? And we actually did get the boat back. Again, the way fate works is just a funny thing. So again, we capsized 1,400 miles from the nearest dry land in January. And so basically we get back, we get on the Stavros, we go back to the States. We're living in Chicago. I'm getting ready to start grad school at this point and out in Arizona. And we get an email to our American Fire account in French. And I read rudimentary French. And it says, we've found your boat. Would you like it back, basically? This was April Fool's Day, right? This is April 1st. And it has a picture of our boat. And it looks fantastic. And I was like, this can't be real. That looks way too good for this boat to have been out there for several months. And so we replied. And they did. They found the boat in the French West Indies, basically a little island called Desalinator. The chief of police actually basically broke maritime law and took it off the fisherman that found it. He had followed our story. And so it took about 2 years of bureaucracy, or about a year of bureaucracy. We eventually got the boat back, and we were fixing it up while I was doing my PhD. Again, I don't suggest that either. So we were fixing up the boat for the '09 race when we got a call about the '07 race and decided to use the Fours boat instead. And so the American Fire got sold to a team that was going to row a couple years after that, and then it's sort of been all over since then. Yeah, and it's currently in Tennessee, rowing down the rivers.
Hi, thank you for a brilliant talk. How did you go about the fundraising when you'd never done anything like that before with such a large amount and when no one kind of really knew who you were?
Yes, that's a great question. How do we go about fundraising? A lot of wrong moves. So my 21st birthday, I spent cold calling 40 local businesses in Salem, Indiana, with this basically, this pitch that they'd never heard before. They didn't know who I was. I was a rival of their basketball students. And so I had a list of 40 people that I was calling. I got 38 no's, 1 maybe, and from the rival of my cross-country rival, I got, you can, $100. And that was the start of the yes. But 38 no's is not a great way to spend your 21st birthday. But it was a very, very steep learning curve, to be honest. We basically set up a nonprofit corporation, had the help of a lawyer, and then set up a whole board. And so people that knew what they were doing helped us out, but we still were the ones that were pitching. And so we would training down in Fort Lauderdale, on the water for 10 hours a day, and then go the next day. And what we thought was professional clothes, we still looked like scrubby little undergraduates that we were. Going to these way out of our league potential sponsors, and we learned basically by the way people said no how to pitch for a yes. Yeah, but it was very much a steep learning curve. Yes.
Do you see much of the other boats on the water? Like after day 2, are they still in anywhere near you?
No. So basically, after about the first 4 hours, we didn't see another ocean rowing boat for the rest of the race. So you get pretty spread out. And so what I didn't mention was when we called the support yacht that day at 2:30 that afternoon, they were actually rescuing the Kiwi crew who had capsized 8 hours before us. And they were 300 miles ahead of us, and the other support yacht was 600 miles to the back of us. So basically the fleet was spread out 900 miles by day 46. So definitely don't see people when you're spread out that far. So yeah, after about the first 4 hours, that night you could sort of see pinpoints of light that might have been other boats, but otherwise, no, we definitely didn't see anybody else. Got time for maybe 2 more questions. Yep. How do the sea parachutes work? That's a great question. So they're basically these 4 meter in diameter. It looks just like a parachute would look on dry land, that are connected to about 50 meters of line. So you sort of throw it overboard, and then it opens up. And if you've ever seen how a jellyfish swims, it sort of undulates like this. And so that's what the sea anchor does. It's underwater, and it fills up with water, and it sort of undulates like a jellyfish. So it's sort of opened up, and that's a lot of water in a 4 meter diameter. And so basically the water will go into the parachute and stop us from going with the wind and the waves. Does that answer your question? Sweet. One more, last one. Yes.
It may be an appropriate last one. You're talking to us today, but how have you been able to inspire and help other people, especially kids, from your own experience? That's
perfect last question. This is one of my favorite things to be able to do. To broad audiences, but especially young audiences and school children. Because a lot of younger people haven't experienced these big challenges. They don't really know how to cope with these sort of things. And so getting to go and talk to children and at some points, bringing the boats and really just talking about the story is one of the greatest honors of my life. Obviously, I tell a little bit different stories to different audiences, but I've definitely, I think I've kept their attention and definitely getting lots of good questions at the end, and them telling me that they're going to go off and do their big adventure. And so that's one of the greatest things that I get to do.
But you haven't set up a foundation or anything?
No, no, I have a hard enough time getting money for my own research. I would love to be able to. I would love to be able to. I don't know if you guys are aware, there is another rower. He's the Blue Rover, and I cannot think of his name right now, and I really apologize. But he's here in Christchurch, and so he rowed across the Atlantic a couple years ago, and has set up a foundation for mental health here in New Zealand, and he's doing some amazing work, and I really apologize that I can't remember his name. But he's set up a foundation because he's lost a couple friends to suicide, and so he's set up a foundation for mental health here in New Zealand, and he's going around to schools and talking about mental health awareness. So, yeah. Thank you guys so very much for coming. I'll stick around if you guys want to ask any more questions.